My name is Melody Hayes, and at 29, I never thought I'd watch a year of my life vanish with just a few keystrokes. I stood frozen in place, heart pounding, as Victoria, my department head, leaned casually over the conference room computer and deleted the entire folder for my AI ethics project off the Nexus server. The presentation was underway. Executives, investors, board members, all of them were watching. Victoria didn't even flinch. With a smug smile, she turned and said, "Start over. Maybe this time you'll create something worthwhile." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The silence in the room stretched long and uncomfortable. Everyone stared at the empty screen, and then at me. But Victoria wasn't done. She had made her move, and she knew exactly what she was doing. What she didn't anticipate was the email waiting in my inbox that evening, from her biggest industry rival. But I'll get to that. Before I dive into everything that followed, the sabotage, the fallout, and the unexpected redemption, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if stories about resilience and justice in the workplace speak to you, hit that subscribe button, because what happened next changed everything. Let me take you back a little. I graduated from Stanford with a computer science degree, specializing in artificial intelligence. But for me, it wasn't just about the algorithms or the data. I cared deeply about what AI could do for the world and how dangerously wrong it could go if we weren't careful. As AI moved into every corner of society, I wanted to be one of the people making sure it worked ethically. I believed in that mission. Nexus Technologies seemed like the perfect place to build that future. They were a growing force in Silicon Valley. Not as massive as the tech giants, but not tiny either. They had the ambition, the funding, and most importantly, the flexibility for new ideas. When they recruited me right out of my master's program, it felt like my dream job. The company had all the expected startup energy: open office plans, stocked snack kitchens, nap pods, and an unspoken rule that 60-hour weeks were just the baseline. Everyone was hungry, competitive, obsessed with making their mark. And for a while, I thrived in that chaos. Victoria Summers was my department head, a seasoned tech leader in her early 40s who had climbed every rung of the ladder in a field notoriously hard on women. I admired her. She seemed like everything I aspired to be: sharp, respected, in control. In my early months at Nexus, she seemed to like me too. She gave me opportunities, challenged me, encouraged me to speak up in meetings. Once, over coffee, she said, "You remind me of myself at your age, driven, focused, unwilling to compromise." I held on to that compliment like it was gold. But I didn't realize that maybe what she saw in me wasn't promise, but threat. It started subtly. Little criticisms during team check-ins, snide remarks about my overthinking or idealism. At first, I thought she was just pushing me to be better. I took it as mentorship, tough love. That changed when I pitched the AI Ethics Framework project. The idea was bold: a learning-based system that could be integrated into autonomous platforms, everything from self-driving cars to medical diagnostic tools, to help them make ethical decisions in real time. Not pre-programmed rules, but an adaptive moral engine capable of learning from diverse cultural norms and values. It was a moonshot, but I believed in it, and so did the CEO. I pitched it at an internal innovation forum. Victoria was clearly irritated I bypassed her, but she didn't stop me, and when the CEO approved it, offering full funding and a year for prototype development, Victoria congratulated me through gritted teeth. That was the moment everything shifted. I threw myself into the work. Days blurred into nights. I skipped holidays, missed my sister's wedding, broke up with my boyfriend. Not because he wasn't supportive, but because I was never around. My apartment was just a place I stored clothes. My actual life happened under fluorescent lights, fueled by caffeine and code. The project consumed me, but not in a bad way. I was building something that could reshape how machines made moral decisions. It was exhilarating. The only person who seemed to truly understand the weight of what I was creating was Diane, a senior developer who'd been at Nexus since its early days. She'd stop by my desk late at night with tea or takeout and remind me to stretch, to breathe. About 6 months in, she dropped a quiet warning. "Victoria's been asking questions about your progress," she said. "Just make sure you're documenting everything." I nodded, thinking it was just standard procedure, but now I wonder if Diane already suspected what was coming. Victoria started demanding more detailed status updates, wanted to be CC'd on every communication. I chalked it up to increased oversight due to the importance of the project. I didn't realize she was collecting intel or waiting for the right moment to strike. Meanwhile, the prototype was coming together beautifully. We'd built an adaptive algorithm that learned from global ethical sources. It could weigh competing values, understand cultural nuance, and most importantly, explain its reasoning in clear, human language. It wasn't just a black box model, it was a transparent, auditable framework. As the investor demo approached, excitement spread throughout the company. Industry whispers had started. Journalists speculated about what Nexus was building. Universities reached out about possible research partnerships. For a brief moment, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe this will be my legacy. Then Victoria started meddling again. She insisted on editing my slides, watering down the technical details, and adding vague language about vision and strategic alignment. She pulled me from executive meetings where my project was being discussed and then blamed me for being uninformed. I tried to push back, but every time she framed my resistance as arrogance or inexperience. "I've been doing this for 18 years, she'd say. "You don't win investors with code, you win them with stories." But I had the story. I was the story. I just didn't realize I was being written out of it. 3 weeks before the presentation, I learned that James Whitfield, CEO of Horizon Systems, our biggest competitor, would be attending. It struck me as odd, but the CEO insisted it was part of a potential partnership conversation. Victoria was furious, but couldn't block it. I wasn't sure what to make of it, but I focused on what I could control: the code, the demos, the message. I prepared like my career depended on it, because it did. By the time the big day arrived, I had tested every demo 100 times. I had backups of everything on Nexus servers, on my personal drives. I was ready. Or so I thought. The morning of the presentation felt surreal. I arrived early, nerves buzzing beneath my skin, rehearsing every line in my head. The conference room gradually filled. Executives, department heads, board members, potential investors. James Whitfield was easy to spot. He sat alone at the back, flipping through the briefing packet, expression unreadable. Even from a distance, he exuded quiet intensity. Victoria arrived last, impeccably dressed, in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my rent. She greeted every executive with warmth and familiarity, her charm turned up to 11. When she finally made eye contact with me, she gave a curt nod, nothing more. And then I noticed something strange. Instead of taking her usual seat beside the CEO, Victoria had stationed herself behind the presentation computer. That was supposed to be my place. I hesitated, unsure whether to push back, but the room was watching. Now wasn't the time. The presentation began. I opened by framing the ethical dilemma facing artificial intelligence, how machines, increasingly making life-altering decisions, were operating with minimal oversight or moral reasoning. Heads nodded. I had them. Then came the transition into our framework. As I spoke, Victoria interrupted with a so-called clarifying comment. "What Melody means," she said with a condescending smile, "is that we've enhanced existing ethical models rather than creating something entirely new." I blinked. That wasn't what I meant at all. "Our approach diverges significantly," I said carefully, trying not to sound combative. "Rather than programming static rules, our system adapts by learning from a range of ethical frameworks while maintaining consistency through a value prioritization engine." Her smile didn't waver. Perhaps we should move to the demo before getting lost in theory. I pressed on, showing how our model outperformed traditional methods across simulated crisis scenarios. It was data I'd meticulously validated through independent protocols, but Victoria again jumped in. "I think we should note that these results haven't been peer-reviewed," she said, her tone faux cautious. "They're promising, but preliminary." I opened my mouth to respond, to explain that 3 separate teams had verified our findings, but Victoria had already clicked forward to the next slide. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Every insight I offered, she diluted. Every innovation, she reframed. Her interruptions, subtle enough to seem professional, slowly corroded the confidence I had built in the room. I could feel it slipping away. Some executives began checking their phones. Others glanced at each other, unsure what to believe. Only James Whitfield remained engaged. He watched every exchange closely, eyes flicking between Victoria and me, as though analyzing a chess match. Finally, I reached the last and most powerful part of the presentation, a live demonstration of our explainability interface. The AI would walk through a complex moral decision, explaining its process in plain language. This was the heart of our innovation. But before I could launch it, Victoria cut in again. "I'm concerned that what we're seeing here is essentially a black box solution," she said, using a term that was kryptonite in ethical AI discussions. "Can we really call this transparent if the system's internal logic isn't fully traceable?" That was outrageous. The entire second phase of development had been dedicated to building explainability protocols. I had slides, I had visuals, I had documentation. "If you'll allow me," I said, voice trembling slightly, "I'd like to show exactly how our system ensures transparency and traceability." "I think what the team is trying to express," Victoria interrupted, "is that while progress has been made, transparency challenges still exist." The team? There was no team. This had been my project, my design, my sleepless nights. Victoria had attended a handful of review meetings and contributed nothing of substance. Yet now she used "we" like a cloak to hide behind. I took a step forward. "The breakthrough in our system is precisely in solving the transparency problem. If I could just demonstrate the interface." Victoria stood up. "Perhaps it would be more efficient if I clarified some of the technical aspects before we proceed," she said smoothly. She walked to the computer. My blood turned to ice. "This wasn't part of the plan," I tried to stop her. "Victoria, we agreed on the presentation flow. Please." She ignored me. "I believe there has been some miscommunication about the state of development," she said to the room. "Let me show you where we actually stand." She opened the server directory. My heart started pounding. Then she selected every folder labeled with the project name. Click Delete. A confirmation box appeared. Without hesitation, she clicked Yes. And just like that, everything disappeared. Months of code, thousands of lines, a year of breakthroughs, failures, learnings, recoveries, gone. Wiped from the server in a few seconds. There was a collective gasp from the room. You could feel the tension pull tight like a piano wire. Victoria turned to the executives, her expression somber. "Unfortunately, what we've been developing has fundamental flaws. I've made the executive decision to redirect our efforts before investing further in a flawed approach." She looked at me, eyes cold, triumphant. "Start over," she said, voice laced with condescension. "Maybe this time you'll create something worthwhile." Silence. I stood there, breath caught in my chest, staring at the now empty screen. The humiliation was complete, and in front of every person who mattered. Except maybe not everyone. From the corner of my eye, I saw James Whitfield watching Victoria, not with confusion, but with quiet calculation. His face had hardened, the corners of his mouth pressed tight. But the contempt wasn't for me. He had just seen something that shifted how he viewed her. I still had backups, of course, multiple layers. No serious developer would risk a single point of failure. But none of that mattered in this moment. Victoria had destroyed my credibility in front of every power player in the company. The message was loud and clear. She would rather kill the project than let me be the one to succeed. Someone had to break the silence. That someone had to be me. "I believe," I said, voice surprisingly steady, "we'll need to reschedule this presentation. I apologize for the inconvenience." And I walked out. No tears, no rage, no yelling. Just a calm, professional exit, while my world crumbled around me. I made it to the elevator before the shaking started. By the time I reached my car, the first tear slipped free, hot and silent. But I wouldn't give Victoria the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart in front of anyone. Not the executives, not my coworkers, not even Diane. Instead, I drove aimlessly for a while, until I ended up in the one place I knew no one would bother me, the women's bathroom on the 14th floor. Most employees avoided it in favor of the newly renovated ones downstairs. It was quiet, dimly lit, and most importantly, empty. I locked myself in the last stall, sat on the cold tile floor, and let it hit me. Grief, rage, disbelief. It wasn't just code she deleted. It was the nights I skipped sleep to debug a malfunctioning moral logic loop, the dinner dates I canceled, the milestones I missed with my family, the faith I poured into a project I believed could change the world. And Victoria had erased it with a few clicks, like it was spam in her inbox. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for my legs to go numb, long enough that I couldn't tell if I was crying from sadness or fury anymore. The door creaked open. "Melody?" Diane's voice, soft, hesitant. "Security saw you come in." I stayed quiet, not ready. "What she did," Diane said, her voice echoing slightly against the tile, "was inexcusable. Everyone in that room knew it. Even Bradford looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. And that man would ignore a building fire if it interrupted his quarterly reports." I unlocked the door. She stood there, holding a bottle of water and a crumpled packet of tissues. "She's been planning this," Diane said as she sat beside me on the floor. "I didn't realize how far she'd go, but I should have said more. I tried to warn you about her asking questions, about documenting everything." "What do you mean planning this?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Diane exhaled. "She's been undermining you for months, ever since the ethics framework got greenlit over her proposal. She's been telling people you're difficult, that you refuse feedback, that your progress was exaggerated, whispering just enough poison to sow doubt. And the execs? They trust her. She's been at Nexus for nearly a decade." I clenched my jaw. "She never contributed to the project." "I know," Diane said gently, "but perception wins when leadership isn't paying attention." "I have backups," I said, more to myself than to her, encrypted, off-site, mirrored every week. She didn't destroy everything. Diane's expression darkened. "You should check them, immediately." I stared at her. "Why?" "Last month, remember the security audit? She requested admin access to all developer environments for 24 hours. Said it was for compliance." Realization hit me like a punch to the gut. She had my credentials. I stood abruptly, my knees unsteady. I pulled my personal laptop from my bag and connected to the backup servers. Access denied. I tried another. Same result. "She locked me out," I whispered. "She revoked my permissions." "Check your personal cloud," Diane urged. I logged in, navigated to my encrypted backup. Empty. Empty. My head swam. "How? This is my personal drive. She couldn't have—" "She could," Diane said quietly, "if she had your login during the audit, if she knew what to look for. This wasn't a meltdown. This was coordinated. She hadn't just sabotaged the presentation. She had erased every avenue of recovery, systematically, precisely, ruthlessly." "I need to talk to her," I said suddenly, standing. "Melody, wait," Diane grabbed my arm. "That's what she wants. You storming into her office emotional and angry. She's already framed you as unstable. If you lose control now, you're handing her more ammunition." But I couldn't sit still. I needed to look her in the eye. I needed to ask why. I walked briskly toward Victoria's office. Diane trailed behind me, still whispering warnings I couldn't process. Victoria was at her desk, calmly typing, as if she hadn't just detonated my career an hour earlier. She glanced up, mildly annoyed. "I'm busy, Melody. If this is about the presentation, we can discuss it during your performance review next week." "You deleted my project," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. "Not just from the presentation server, from every backup. You used my credentials to access my personal cloud. During the audit." Victoria leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "Those are serious accusations. Do you have evidence?" Of course I didn't. She'd been thorough. "Why?" I asked. "Why would you destroy something that could have benefited the company, that could have advanced the entire field?" She tilted her head slightly. "If your work was truly valuable, you would have had better safeguards in place," she said, voice cool. "In this industry, only the paranoid survive. Consider this a learning opportunity." I stared at her, stunned. No remorse, no defensiveness, just icy detachment. "I'm going to Bradford," I said. "I'll tell him everything." Her lips curled in a smile. "By all means. Tell him you failed to secure your files and are now making unfounded accusations against your superior. That always goes well." She turned back to her screen. "I trusted you," I said, barely above a whisper. She didn't even flinch. "Then you've learned another valuable lesson." I walked out of her office with leaden steps. Diane stood nearby, her face confirming what I already knew. There would be no justice inside Nexus Technologies. I went back to my desk in a daze and began collecting my things. No one spoke. A few curious glances, hushed whispers. I didn't care. I just wanted to be gone. Back in my apartment that night, I sat on the couch, still in my work clothes, staring blankly at the wall. My laptop was on the coffee table. I opened it and checked one last place, a dusty, long-forgotten external hard drive from the earliest development phase. I hadn't used it in months. It didn't have everything, but maybe it had something. With trembling hands, I plugged it in. It whirred to life. There it was, an early version of the framework. Crude, messy, months out of date, but complete. It was a start. I sat back and exhaled. I wasn't defeated yet. Then I saw the email. From James Whitfield at horizonsystems.com. Mail. To James Whitfield, Horizon Systems, Com. Subject: Your AI Ethics Framework, an Opportunity. I opened it. Miss Hayes, I witnessed something today that suggests Nexus may not be the right environment for your work. I'd like to discuss a potential opportunity. Are you available this evening? Riverside Restaurant, 8 p.m. James Whitfield, CEO, Horizon Systems. I stared at the screen, unsure if it was real. Corporate espionage? Sympathy? A trap? But after everything I'd been through, I had nothing left to lose. I typed my reply. The Riverside Restaurant was just as upscale as its name suggested, perched on the top floor of a glass-paneled tower, all ambient lighting and panoramic views of the city skyline. It was the kind of place where deals were made over 5-course dinners and vintage wines, not where I'd expected to spend the evening after having my life's work torched. I arrived in my wrinkled work clothes, hair pulled back in a hasty bun, feeling wildly underdressed. But I didn't have the energy to care. I wasn't here to impress anyone. I just needed answers. James Whitfield stood as I approached his table in the corner. He was younger than I expected, early 40s maybe, with sharp features and the same composed intensity I'd seen during the presentation. His handshake was firm, his gaze steady. Miss Hayes, he said, thank you for coming. I imagine today was difficult. That's one way to put it, I said as I sat across from him. He didn't offer condolences or fake sympathy, just nodded, like he understood I wouldn't want platitudes. I'll be direct, he said, leaning slightly forward. What I witnessed this morning wasn't just unprofessional, it was deliberate sabotage. I've spent years in this industry, and I've seen plenty of ambition. But rarely have I seen a senior executive publicly destroy promising work with such precision. He paused. And that's exactly what it was. Promising. Groundbreaking, actually. You got that from half a presentation? I asked, still wary. No, he said, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. I got that from your papers. Your thesis from Stanford. The patent applications Nexus filed under your name. I've been following your research since your first publication on adaptive moral reasoning in AI. I was at that presentation today because I wanted to see you. The potential Nexus partnership was a distant second. I blinked. He'd been following me? James signaled the waiter and ordered for both of us with quiet confidence, then turned back to me. Let me be clear, he said. I want to offer you a position at Horizon Systems, lead developer of our ethical AI division, complete creative control over your research. I stared. You're offering me a job, I said slowly, without interviews, references, or even a technical screening? You've already passed all of that, he replied. Your published work and patent filings are the best technical screening I could ask for. And the way you handled yourself today, that was your interview. I folded my arms. This feels opportunistic, like you're trying to poach Nexus's intellectual property. James didn't flinch. Horizon has no interest in Nexus's proprietary material, he said calmly. From what I saw today, Nexus no longer has any proprietary material. What we're interested in is you, your methodology, your vision, your ability to create something transformative. We want you to rebuild what you started, better this time, and we want to give you the support Nexus clearly didn't. I hesitated. What about legal issues? I have a non-compete. Our legal team reviewed the standard Nexus employment contract, James said, reaching into his briefcase. The non-compete clause is overly broad and likely unenforceable, especially given the events of today, which could qualify as constructive dismissal. He slid a folder across the table. We're prepared to indemnify you against any action Nexus might attempt. You won't face it alone. I opened the folder. A full employment offer, complete with salary, triple my current pay at Nexus, legal coverage, resources, a full team of engineers. It was everything I'd dreamed of, and more. Still, I needed to be sure. Why me? I asked. James leaned back, hands steepled. Because you're not just technically skilled. You care about what your work means. That's rare, and it's exactly what the industry needs right now, especially as AI grows faster than our understanding of it. He paused. Technology without ethics is dangerous. You're one of the few people building the map before we all get lost. I want to give you the tools to finish it. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. Our food arrived, but I barely touched it. I asked questions. about the team, the budget, the autonomy I'd have, and he answered every one with calm, unflinching confidence. Everything he described aligned perfectly with the vision I'd had for my work before it got tangled in Nexus politics. By the time dessert arrived, my decision was made. "I'd like to accept," I said, extending my hand. "When can I start?" James smiled. "How about Monday? That gives you tomorrow to tie up anything left at Nexus." I nodded. Then a question bubbled up. "One last thing. How did you get my personal email?" James chuckled. "LinkedIn felt too impersonal. I figured your work email was compromised. My assistant is resourceful." As we stood outside the restaurant under the glow of city lights, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Victoria thought she'd burned down my future, but maybe she'd just cleared the path for something better. I walked into Nexus Technologies the next morning with a strange sense of calm. The same security guard gave me his usual nod, unaware that it would be the last time I passed through those doors. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it. My desk with its chaotic arrangement of notes, my water bottle still half full, my monitor still glowing with its blue login screen. But something fundamental had shifted. I sat down and drafted a short, direct resignation letter, effective immediately. No dramatic statements, just the truth. Irreconcilable differences in professional ethics. I printed 2 copies, folded them neatly, and walked straight to Victoria's office. I didn't knock. She looked up, slightly annoyed at the interruption, until she saw the paper I laid on her desk. "What's this?" she asked, not even glancing at it. "My resignation," I said, "effective immediately." That made her look. She picked up the letter and skimmed it. Her expression shifted. First surprise, then that smug little smile she wore so well. "I understand," she said in a tone that pretended to be sympathetic. "Yesterday was difficult. Taking some time to regroup is probably for the best." "I'm not regrouping," I corrected her. "I've accepted another position." That wiped the smugness off her face, just for a moment. A flicker of something she couldn't fully hide. "Really?" she said. "That was quick. May I ask where?" "You may," I said, pausing at the door, "but I'm not obligated to tell you." I turned to leave, but stopped with one last look over my shoulder. "I hope whatever you manage to salvage from the ruins of my project brings you the recognition you're so desperate for." It was petty, maybe, but satisfying. From there, I went to HR to submit the second copy of my resignation and begin the exit process. Melissa, the HR representative, was someone I'd only spoken to a handful of times before, but her professionalism faltered a bit as I recounted what had happened. "This is very sudden," she said as she processed my paperwork. "Would you be willing to share why you're leaving? Your performance reviews have been excellent." I hesitated, then decided there was no reason to lie. Calmly and factually, I explained what had happened during the presentation. Victoria's sabotage, the months of gaslighting, manipulation, and erasure. I kept my voice level, detached, even as I saw Melissa's expression tighten. "That's disturbing," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll need to document this." "I don't expect anything will come of it," I replied. "She's been here longer. She has the relationships, but I want it on record. For the next person she does this to." Melissa nodded slowly. "You're not the first to raise concerns about her management style, but never anything this extreme." The rest of the exit interview was procedural, returning my badge, signing final forms, confirming contact information. Just as I was wrapping up, Diane appeared at the doorway. "You're really leaving?" she asked, eyes wide with sadness. "It's for the best," I said. "I've found somewhere my work will be valued." We stepped into the hallway together. I could feel the weight of it all lifting, moment by moment. "I should have said more," Diane said softly. "Warned you more directly. I just didn't think she'd take it this far." "There's nothing you could have done," I reassured her. She was going to do what she did, no matter what. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Horizon Systems." Her eyes widened. "James Whitfield approached you?" I nodded. "Yesterday evening." A slow smile spread across her face. "Victoria is going to lose her mind when she finds out. Horizon is everything she wants Nexus to be." I smiled back. It was the first time in a long while I felt something close to peace. As I gathered the few personal items from my desk, my headphones, a few books, a framed photo of my sister's wedding I hadn't been able to attend, I noticed Victoria watching me from her office. Phone to her ear, brows furrowed, already spinning a new narrative, no doubt, probably telling someone I couldn't handle pressure, or that I'd been unstable since the presentation. I ignored her. Several coworkers stopped me on the way out. Curious but supportive, I kept my answers short. Creative differences with leadership, I said. It's just time. No need to torch the bridge for those who hadn't lit the match. By noon, I had walked out of Nexus Technologies for the last time. The weekend passed in a blur, packing up, reviewing onboarding documents from Horizon, organizing what code I had managed to recover from that old external drive. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. Enough to start rebuilding. Enough to remind me that Victoria couldn't erase me. And then Monday came. Horizon Systems headquarters was everything Nexus pretended to be. The building itself was sleek, modern, and surrounded by genuine sustainability initiatives, solar panels, rooftop gardens, even bike racks that were actually used. There was a quiet sense of focus in the air, not the frantic chaos Nexus wore like a badge of honor. The front desk was expecting me. "Welcome to Horizon, Ms. Hayes," the receptionist said with a warm smile as she handed me a temporary badge. "Your guide will take you upstairs shortly." A few minutes later, the elevator doors opened to reveal James Whitfield. No assistant, no fanfare, just him, punctual, composed, and still carrying that sense of quiet confidence. "Welcome to Horizon, Melody," he said, extending a hand. He led me through the open-plan floor where teams were already deep in discussion, some in glass meeting rooms, others in informal huddle spaces with whiteboards covered in logic diagrams and code snippets. It wasn't just high-tech, it was alive. "I hope your office suits you," James said as he opened the door to a spacious corner space with tall windows and natural light pouring in. It was easily twice the size of my old cubicle at Nexus. "We can adjust anything you'd like," he added. "Layout, equipment, even the furniture. Your comfort matters." I took a moment just to breathe it in. This wasn't just a job. This was a chance to start over, on my terms. My team was introduced later that morning. 8 developers with specialized experience in AI systems, ethics modeling, machine learning, and cultural systems analysis. They were smart, motivated, and curious. But more than that, they were respectful. There was no ego, no territorial defensiveness, just a shared desire to build something meaningful. They'd been briefed about the general idea of the framework I had proposed at Nexus, but didn't know the specifics. And I preferred it that way. This time, I wanted the work to grow collaboratively, not as a solo act burdened by sabotage. Those first few weeks were intense. We used the outdated version of my original project as a blueprint, refining it with the help of the new team. The fresh perspectives led to improvements I never could have come up with alone. Our new architecture incorporated expanded transparency features, broader ethical input data sets, and real-time reasoning traceability. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. I started eating actual meals again. I even caught up with friends I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Most surprising of all, James Whitfield checked in regularly, but never hovered. He didn't micromanage or demand constant status updates. He asked what we needed, cleared roadblocks, and then stepped aside to let us work. When we hit a setback in the 3rd week, a core module that wouldn't stabilize under real-time load, his response wasn't panic or blame, it was support. He approved more resources, added 2 contractors to assist, and told us to take the time we needed to get it right. By the 3rd month, we had rebuilt not just the original framework, but a significantly upgraded version of it. Our AI's ethical reasoning process was not only traceable, it was intuitive. We had created a user-facing explanation layer that translated decisions into plain language without losing nuance. It could walk through a choice, why it chose one course of action over another, with clarity. It was the missing piece the field had needed for years. By month 4, we were submitting patent applications. My name appeared first on everyone, and everyone else who contributed got listed too. Proper credit, proper recognition. A stark contrast to what I'd experienced before. Month 5, we prepared for live trials. Controlled environments, high-stakes simulations, everything from autonomous vehicle scenarios to medical diagnostic dilemmas. The framework handled each case with adaptability, consistency, and transparency. And then, in month 6, we launched. The deployment data was better than we'd even hoped. Industry publications began taking notice. Our approach was featured in Wired, Tech Journal, and Ethics in AI Quarterly. Emails flooded my inbox. Research collaborations, speaking invitations, advisory requests. James encouraged me to accept the most prestigious ones. Establish your voice, he said. The industry needs it. Then came the invitation that made everything full circle. A Tech Future Conference, the industry's biggest annual event, a showcase of innovation where every major player, from startups to giants, unveiled their most significant advancements. Both Horizon and Nexus were invited to present. I couldn't believe the timing. We prepared meticulously. Every demo was airtight, every slide refined. Unlike my last big presentation, this one was a team effort. We rehearsed, supported each other, offered feedback without ego. I would lead the presentation, but every person's contribution would be acknowledged. The morning of the conference, I stood backstage as Horizon's name was announced, heart steady. No anxiety this time, just readiness. And then I saw her, Victoria, across the backstage corridor, standing in a cluster of junior Nexus developers, barking quiet orders, her expression taut. She hadn't seen me yet. I took a deep breath and turned away, focusing on my team, my work, my future. Nexus went on stage before us. I watched from the wings, curiosity pulling me forward despite myself. Victoria stood confidently before the audience, flanked by two junior developers who looked more nervous than prepared. Their presentation covered a revamped version of the same AI ethics initiative I had once led, only now it was watered down, superficial. They talked about guidelines, best practices, and compliance modules. There was no demonstration, no adaptive reasoning, no user-facing explainability features. Just slides, buzzwords, smoke and mirrors. The applause was polite, but there was no energy in the room, no spark. And then it was Horizon's turn. As I walked onto the stage, my team seated nearby, I felt the lights hit me and saw the packed auditorium staring up, waiting. And I wasn't scared. I was ready. I opened with the problem, the ethical vacuum in modern AI, the need for transparency, for systems that could not only make decisions, but explain them. Then I introduced our solution, our framework. What followed was everything I had once imagined and more. Live demonstrations showed the AI evaluating ethically complex scenarios, balancing public safety, privacy, and autonomy, and walking through its reasoning in human terms. The audience watched in awe as our system not only made nuanced choices, but explained its moral calculus with clarity. They applauded mid-presentation, whispered to each other, leaned forward in their seats. Then came the Q&A. Hands shot up across the auditorium. Researchers, investors, engineers. Their questions were technical, insightful, and most importantly, respectful. They wanted to understand how we'd done it, not whether we'd done it. And then, from the middle of the room, someone stood. Victoria. Her voice was carefully neutral, but her eyes burned. This framework, she said, bears remarkable similarities to a project that was under development at Nexus Technologies. Could you clarify its origins? A hush fell over the crowd. I opened my mouth, but James stepped forward. He took the mic from its stand with the calm authority of someone who had been waiting for this moment. We're familiar with Nexus's prior efforts, he said evenly. However, as any expert in the field can confirm, our framework is built on foundational research published by Ms. Hayes years before her employment at Nexus, all of which is public record, including patent filings and academic papers. He looked directly at Victoria. Our approach is distinct and original, and we welcome anyone to compare our documentation. The moderator thanked her and moved on, but the message had landed. Victoria sat down, face frozen in place, and the conference moved forward without her. 2 weeks later, the true validation arrived. Health Tech Systems, the largest medical technology provider in the country, announced a new partnership with Horizon. They had been negotiating with Nexus for nearly a year, but after our presentation, they pulled out and signed with us. The industry buzzed. News outlets picked up the story, calling it a landmark shift in ethical AI. Analysts projected a potential 9-figure contract for Horizon. And then, buried in a brief note in Tech Leader Weekly, I saw it. Nexus Technologies announces leadership change. Victoria Summers removed from position as department head following internal review. No reason given, but we all knew. A week later, at a networking event, I ran into Bradford, Nexus's CEO. He approached me stiffly at the refreshment table, a glass of wine in hand and an awkward smile on his face. "Melody," he said, extending his hand. You've done remarkable work at Horizon. Thank you, I replied, shaking it briefly. I want you to know, he said slowly, that what happened at Nexus, it wasn't reflective of our company's values. If you ever consider returning, I'd personally create a department around your work, reporting directly to me. I smiled. Bradford, I appreciate the offer, but I've already found a place where my work is valued from day one. I'm not interested in being appreciated only after I've proven myself somewhere else. He nodded. To his credit, he didn't push. Understood, he said, but the offer stands. As he walked away, I felt no gloating, no desire for revenge. Only clarity. And I had made the right choice. Not just in leaving, but in rebuilding. In trusting myself again. In finding people who did too. The first anniversary of my departure from Nexus came and went without fanfare. I didn't even realize the date had passed until Diane walked into my office with a tray of cupcakes and a grin. Happy Independence Day, she said, setting them on my desk. I laughed, the memory of that awful conference room scene now softened by the distance, and the success that had followed. I almost forgot, I admitted. Hard to believe it's only been a year, she said, settling into the chair across from me. It feels like a lifetime ago. It did. The pain that had once been so sharp had dulled into something more reflective than raw. I no longer woke up dreading the workday. I no longer questioned if my ideas had value. That slow, poisonous erosion of self-worth Victoria had orchestrated had stopped the moment I walked away. Healing didn't happen overnight. In the early months at Horizon, I still flinched at unexpected emails. I second-guessed praise. I wondered when the other shoe would drop. James noticed. During one of our one-on-one meetings, he said something that stuck with me. I know you're waiting for the ceiling to collapse, he said gently, but trust is earned over time. Let us earn it. Judge us by what we do, not by what you survived. And they did. Every action, every collaboration, every decision made with integrity slowly rebuilt my faith in the kind of workplace I'd nearly stopped believing existed. The framework we developed continued to evolve. We expanded it beyond its original scope, integrating ethical parameters tailored for education, transportation, even criminal justice reform. We added multilingual ethical input sources, increased explainability features, and began working with regulators to draft standards for ethical AI deployment. Our internal culture mirrored our external mission. I started mentoring junior developers, not just in technical skills, but in boundaries, in balance, in self-worth. One of them, Sophia, reminded me so much of myself. Brilliant, eager, and dangerously close to burnout. I found her one night still at her desk past 10 p.m. You know, I said, leaning against her cubicle, no one's giving out medals for most sleep-deprived developer. She looked up sheepishly. I just want to prove myself. You already have, I said gently. Your value isn't measured in hours. It's measured in insight, and insight suffers when you're exhausted. That conversation turned into policy. I proposed a formal mentorship program within our department, one that didn't just reward performance, but nurtured growth. With James's support, it became a company-wide initiative. The cultural shift was palpable. Trust flowed more freely. Ideas moved faster. Innovation bloomed. And then about 14 months after I joined Horizon, the news hit. Victoria Summers had officially left Nexus Technologies. No new role announced, no press release, just gone. Rumors swirled, multiple complaints, NDAs, internal investigations, finally catching up with her. But I didn't care about the details. I didn't need her downfall to feel validated. I'd built something real, not in spite of her, but because I refused to let her destroy me. In May, 18 months after that presentation, I received an unexpected email. The AI Ethics Consortium, the field's most prestigious organization, had selected me for their annual WISE Innovation Award. Not just for technical advancement, but for promoting transparency, inclusion, and human-centered design in artificial intelligence. The night of the ceremony, as I stood on stage holding that award, I looked out at the audience and felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Pride. True, unguarded pride. In my speech, I said, ethical AI starts with ethical work environments. The systems we build reflect the values of the spaces we build them in. If we want just machines, we need just teams. If we want explainable algorithms, we need leadership that explains its own decisions. If we want accountability in code, we must practice accountability in culture. The standing ovation that followed wasn't about me. It was a recognition of the truth we all knew, but rarely spoke aloud. When I stepped off the stage, James met me at the edge of the crowd with a rare grin. "The board just approved a new executive position," he said. "Chief Innovation Officer. It's yours if you want it." I stared at him, stunned. "You're serious?" He nodded. "It's time the person shaping the future of ethical AI had a seat at the leadership table." I accepted. And with it came a larger team, a wider platform, and the opportunity to shape policy not just within Horizon, but across the industry. The promotion to Chief Innovation Officer brought with it a whole new level of responsibility, but also opportunity. I now had a direct hand in setting Horizon's research agenda, overseeing multiple interdisciplinary teams, and shaping company-wide policies on transparency, bias mitigation, and ethical deployment. The title didn't just represent personal advancement, it was a symbol of how far Horizon was willing to go to align values with action. It also meant more visibility, more scrutiny, and more invitations. Panels, conferences, advisory boards, government think tanks. Every week brought another request to speak or consult or weigh in. And though the pace was dizzying, I embraced it, because this time I wasn't alone and I wasn't fighting uphill. Horizon didn't just tolerate my voice, they amplified it. Our ethical AI framework was adopted by 2 national governments for use in public infrastructure. A major university partnered with us to launch a graduate program around human-centered AI design. We even helped a nonprofit apply our model to disaster response simulations in under-resourced communities. I watched as the framework I had once coded alone in a dark office, eating protein bars and sleeping on a couch, now shaped how the world made decisions. Diane and I made it a ritual to get lunch together every month. Same cafe, same corner table. At our next lunch after the promotion, she raised her iced tea with a mischievous grin. "To karma," she said, clinking her glass against mine. I smiled. It wasn't karma that built the framework or wrote the patents or rebuilt a team. "True," she said, "but you have to admit, there's a certain poetic justice in all of it. Victoria tried to destroy your career. Instead, she launched it into orbit." I looked down at my food, then back at her. "The real justice is that the framework is actually making a difference. That was always the goal, even back at Nexus. She saw it as a threat. I saw it as a tool to help." Diane nodded. "Oh, speaking of Nexus," she added, "did you hear the latest?" I raised an eyebrow. "They're restructuring again. Bradford's out. The board finally held him accountable for the exodus of talent, for losing health tech, for Victoria." I blinked. I hadn't expected that, but I wasn't surprised either. A culture that enabled leaders like Victoria was bound to crumble eventually. Leadership isn't just about being first to market. It's about creating spaces where people can do their best work without fear, ego, or sabotage. As Diane and I walked back to the office, I took a moment to let it all sink in. Just 2 years ago, I had been sitting on the cold tile floor of a Nexus bathroom stall, sobbing into my hands, convinced my career was over. Now I was leading industry innovation. But more importantly, I was whole. The deeper I settled into my role at Horizon, the more I realized that my journey wasn't just about rebuilding a project. It was about reclaiming a sense of self. The framework had taken on a life of its own. It was now being piloted in international education systems to help guide equitable resource allocation. It had been implemented in judicial review algorithms to identify systemic bias. One health network even used our ethics model to refine how organ transplant priorities were decided, adding layers of human empathy to traditionally cold equations. And through it all, our team remained intact, engaged, united. We didn't compete with each other for credit. We lifted each other up. Senior developers mentored junior ones without resentment. Feedback was given with compassion. Our failure reviews weren't postmortems. They were growth sessions. The culture at Horizon wasn't just aspirational, it was intentional. We had built something extraordinary. But what meant the most to me was mentoring. Not just Sophia, though she continued to thrive, but an entire cohort of young developers who entered our division wide-eyed and driven. I knew what that hunger looked like. I'd worn it myself, but I also knew how dangerous it could become if not guided. I began holding monthly roundtables called Ethics and Survival. We didn't just talk about AI, we talked about navigating the industry as a human being. How to say no without guilt. How to stand up for your work. How to Spot Manipulation Masked as Mentorship. I watched them bloom in ways I wish someone had helped me bloom earlier. And somewhere along the way, I began to heal more deeply. I reconnected with my family, took my first real vacation in 5 years, a quiet week on the Oregon coast with no devices and no deadlines. I started hiking again, cooking, laughing more. I even started dating someone kind and grounded who respected the boundaries I worked so hard to build. There was no dramatic romantic subplot in my story, no sweeping gesture or revenge romance, just steadiness, trust, quiet joy. It felt radical, because for so long I had equated value with productivity and love with sacrifice. Now I knew better. The real love, the love worth keeping, was the kind that didn't ask you to bleed for it. And then, 18 months to the day after that disastrous presentation at Nexus, I received an email that nearly made me drop my coffee. And subject, Standards Collaboration Inquiry. The sender? The International Artificial Intelligence Standards Organization. They wanted to consult with Horizon and with me on incorporating our ethical reasoning model into their global AI governance framework, not just in theory, in practice, in law. It was the kind of invitation that came maybe once in a career. I stared at the screen for a long moment, and then I smiled. Not because I had won, not because Victoria had lost, but because I had built something no one could delete with a keystroke. Something that belonged to the world now, not just to me. That afternoon, I walked into our weekly leadership meeting with James and the other department heads, and I shared the news. They erupted in applause. James nodded with his usual calm, then added, "And that, everyone, is what happens when you bet on the right people." No backhanded compliments, no micromanagement, no attempt to take credit. Just respect. Simple, powerful. The kind that makes you want to give everything you've got, not because you're scared, but because you're seen. As I sat in my office that evening, city lights blinking to life outside the glass walls, I reflected on the path that brought me here. From that sterile Nexus conference room where my work was erased in front of an audience, to this moment, overseeing a global ethics initiative that might shape the future of artificial intelligence itself, it was more than I had dared to dream, back when I was sleeping under my desk and questioning whether I mattered at all. And yet I knew something with certainty now. It wasn't luck that brought me here. It was conviction. It was survival. It was the quiet choice, day after day, to keep showing up for myself. Victoria had once told me, only the paranoid survive. She was wrong. Only the resilient thrive. And resilience isn't built in silence. It's built in conversations, in collaboration, in creating spaces where brilliance doesn't have to come at the cost of your well-being. A few weeks after the Standards Organization inquiry, Horizon hosted a global summit on ethical AI implementation. Leaders from governments, nonprofits, research institutions, and major tech firms gathered to align on core principles. I gave the keynote, standing before hundreds of stakeholders from every continent. When I spoke, I didn't open with code or technical schematics. I opened with my story. Because ethics isn't about theory, it's about people. It's about what happens when ambition goes unchecked, when systems reward sabotage over integrity, when leadership fails to protect those building the future. And it's about what's possible when we do better. I ended my speech with a simple question. Have you ever had someone try to diminish your work, your voice, or your vision, only for it to lead you somewhere better? Not despite them, but because of what they revealed about who you don't want to be? The audience was silent for a beat. Then they stood. I wasn't expecting the standing ovation. I wasn't chasing applause. But in that moment, it wasn't about validation. It was about resonance. We were all living through a turning point. And we were choosing to move forward together, with clarity, with courage, and with conscience. Later that night, back at the office, I opened my personal email. A message had come through from a name I hadn't thought about in months. Sophia. She'd just returned from presenting our framework at a university conference. Her first time as lead speaker. She'd crushed it. "Thank you," she wrote, "not just for the opportunity, but for making it safe to be both ambitious and human." I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. That's what it had always been about. Not the title, not the revenge, not even the innovation, but the possibility of building something better for everyone who came after me. So, to anyone listening who's ever been told you're too young, too idealistic, too difficult, or too much, I see you. And if someone tries to erase your work, your worth, your voice, don't let them. Not because you have to fight back the same way they came at you, but because your existence is the answer. Keep building, keep believing. Because sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is just the start of something extraordinary. Have you ever been underestimated, sabotaged, or dismissed, only to rise higher than they ever imagined? If so, share your story in the comments below. I want to hear it. And if this journey resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a reminder. Your value isn't determined by those who try to silence you. It's determined by what you choose to create in spite of them. Thank you for listening. And never forget, you are not the code they tried to delete. You are the system they never saw coming. End part 11 of 11. As I sat in my office that evening, city lights blinking to life outside the glass walls, I reflected on the path that brought me here. From that sterile Nexus conference room where my work was erased in front of an audience, to this moment, overseeing a global ethics initiative that might shape the future of artificial intelligence itself. It was more than I had dared to dream, back when I was sleeping under my desk and questioning whether I mattered at all. And yet I knew something with certainty now. It wasn't luck that brought me here. It was conviction. It was survival. It was the quiet choice, day after day, to keep showing up for myself. Victoria had once told me, only the paranoid survive. She was wrong. Only the resilient thrive. And resilience isn't built in silence. It's built in conversations, in collaboration, in creating spaces where brilliance doesn't have to come at the cost of your well-being. A few weeks after the Standards Organization inquiry, Horizon hosted a global summit on ethical AI implementation. Leaders from governments, nonprofits, research institutions, and major tech firms gathered to align on core principles. I gave the keynote, standing before hundreds of stakeholders from every continent. When I spoke, I didn't open with code or technical schematics. I opened with my story. Because ethics isn't about theory, it's about people. It's about what happens when ambition goes unchecked, when systems reward sabotage over integrity, when leadership fails to protect those building the future. And it's about what's possible when we do better. I ended my speech with a simple question. Have you ever had someone try to diminish your work, your voice, or your vision, only for it to lead you somewhere better? Not to spite them, but because of what they revealed about who you don't want to be? The audience was silent for a beat. Then they stood. I wasn't expecting the standing ovation. I wasn't chasing applause. But in that moment, it wasn't about validation. It was about resonance. We were all living through a turning point, and we were choosing to move forward together, with clarity, with courage, and with conscience. Later that night, back at the office, I opened my personal email. A message had come through from a name I hadn't thought about in months. She'd just returned from presenting our framework at a university conference. Her first time as lead speaker. She'd crushed it. And thank you, she wrote, not just for the opportunity, but for making it safe to be both ambitious and human. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. That's what it had always been about. Not the title, not the revenge, not even the innovation, but the possibility of building something better for everyone who came after me. So, to anyone listening who's ever been told you're too young, too idealistic, too difficult, or too much, I see you. And if someone tries to erase your work, your worth, your voice, don't let them. Not because you have to fight back the same way they came at you, but because your existence is the answer. Keep building, keep believing. Because sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is just the start of something extraordinary. Have you ever been underestimated, sabotaged, or dismissed, only to rise higher than they ever imagined? If so, share your story in the comments below. I want to hear it. And if this journey resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a reminder. Your value isn't determined by those who try to silence you. It's determined by what you choose to create in spite of them. Thank you for listening. And never forget, you are not the code they tried to delete. You are the system they never saw coming.